Joined now by three journalists who've been writing about the campaign, following it closely. Susan Delacourt is a columnist and parliamentary bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Gloria Galloway is a columnist with Postmedia. And Marieke Walsh is a reporter with the Globe and Mail. She joins us from Toronto. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Everybody happy we've come to the end, or are we just waiting for the big excitement in the next few hours here? Marieke, let me start with you.
The question is if it is the end. I think we don't really know that yet.
Yeah. Well, let's go there. What do you think we might see?
I think that's the million-dollar question. I think the fact that we have never seen both leading parties so low in popular support heading into an election says a lot about just this lack of ability from anybody to really galvanize enough support behind them. And so that really raises a lot of questions about what the result will be tonight. And because it's so tight, the 1% difference, 1% swing one way or the other way could be a deciding factor between a minority and a majority.
All right. You know, let's, to be honest, I mean, people have characterized it this way, oh, it's a campaign about nothing. And I mean, campaigns are never about nothing. Yeah. But if it feels to people like it's been a campaign about nothing, what does that say about the campaign?
I've been saying it's not a campaign about nothing, it's about a campaign about a million things. I think everybody has chosen what this election is about to them. So some people think this is an election about climate change. Some people think this is an election about electoral reform, that we shouldn't have another election like this again. Some people think it's about carbon tax. It's basically, and it's a referendum on Justin Trudeau, or is it a referendum on Andrew Scheer? I think this has basically been the first social media election in that it's as fragmented as the social media universe.
What do you think, Gloria?
So, you know, I think we think it's an election about nothing because there have been no really big ideas introduced. I mean, the last time, 2015, we had big ideas being thrown around, like legalization of marijuana and things like that, assisted dying, all kinds of things to really debate. This time, the two big ideas, and I pardon to the other parties, but let's face it, the Liberals or the Conservatives are going to win. And that means it's come down to an election between carbon tax and getting rid of it, of all things, and climate change, which is exactly the opposite, you know, fighting climate change.
Well, you have a carbon tax.
But yeah, carbon tax versus non-carbon tax. Or do we want to, is climate change the big thing that we are worried about it, or is it just something that's going to cost us a lot of money to fight? And, you know, I think these are old ideas in the sense that they've been things that both Liberals and Conservatives have been talking about for a long time. So that's why we think it's become an election a little bit about nothing. But in fact, I think it's been really interesting to see those two dynamics kind of filter everything else below and really become the top two issues for a lot of voters. Do we want to go one way? Are we concerned about global warming, or are we concerned about our pocketbooks and what taxes are going to do us?
Marieke, as we say as journalists, you know, you're holding the pen on the sort of main story tonight for the Globe. So, I mean, what are you watching for?
There's a few things. I think, first of all, the regional divisions. How does this election break down? How closely aligned are the parties between the different regions? I think that's something that all of us should be paying attention to. And then, of course, I think the first sign that we're really going to have about how this night is going is how the East Coast goes, because that was the signal we saw in 2015 that there was this Liberal wave coming. Depending on how many seats fall away from the Liberals on the East Coast, I think will be something that suggests how voters are feeling about Justin Trudeau's leadership, and that I think will set the tone for the rest of the night.
That's kind of interesting. Let's talk about that a little bit, because people have discussed this and wondered about this. We'll know for sure. I mean, we see it we'll know for sure when we see the result whether this has amplified some of the divisions in the country. Certainly, the campaign has. How dangerous do you think that is?
I think this election is interesting to me in that who doesn't get into government may be the parties and the forces that we have to watch. That this is an election where the least interesting things might be happening after the election in government. That if Justin Trudeau does, as most predictions say, get some kind of minority, he still has problems out there. He's got a strong Bloc Québécois now that has risen up in this campaign and reawoken God knows what. He's got Jason Kenney and the Western premiers, assisted by Doug Ford to a little bit, saying that they're going to give him a hard time. So the people who, and there will be the NDP and Greens, there will be considerable annoyance if Trudeau doesn't come through on environment in a strong way too, because they will believe that there has been a mandate for climate in this election. So I think it's going to be fascinating after this.
Right. If let's assume that's the narrative that follows through, what are the challenges going to be for Justin Trudeau in trying to tamp down some of these divisions that are clearly going to, and imagine the kind of divisions we might get if it's a sheer minority by a few seats and he insists on trying to stay in power, and we'll get a Western uprising in some ways if that falls apart and everything else. And
right.
There are lots of consequences.
Well, we shouldn't, obviously we shouldn't be ruling out a sheer minority. I think that's entirely possible. But so here's my prediction for a sheer minority if that happens. He won't last long. He's got no allies in power, and it'll be very difficult for any of the even the Liberals to support a conservative budget. And of course, the Liberals would be hoping that the government does fall and they can give this all another try again, see if they get a majority next time out. If that happens, then Andrew Scheer, if he can hang on for any length of time, will start looking prime ministerial to Canadians. They'll start thinking of him as a prime minister kind of guy, which maybe many of them are not right now. And secondly, they'll be angry at the other parties for bringing down the government so quickly, and I think he has a better shot at making a bigger gain in the next election that'll come at him. But the Liberals are going to have a tough road to hoe. I completely agree with Susan on that. And they will be a little bit beholden to their more left-wing masters. And, there are lots of things. Climate change, yes, but, electoral reform, too.
Let me hear you on that, Marieke. Challenges for, I suppose, the next prime minister, and they each have different challenges depending on who wins tonight. But if it's Scheer or Justin Trudeau, but maybe start there. What's the challenge for Justin Trudeau?
I think the challenge for Justin Trudeau, I guess it's if he's prime minister. First of all, I think the first question we'll have tonight is who is claiming victory. We could see a scenario where they're both claiming victory, right? So I think we need to see where that goes first. But of course, Mr. Trudeau is going to have to see how he walks that line. If he does hold the most seats, or if he is able to win the confidence of the House, he is going to be beholden, as you said, to presumably the NDP and the Greens, but we could also be in a position where the Bloc has more seats than the NDP. So I think it's a bit too soon to say who will be their masters. What we do know, though, is that it will be a challenge transitioning from a majority governing where you do have the votes to a minority situation where you do have to do more consensus building, more negotiations, and more compromise. I think all of the parties know, though, and Gloria kind of hinted at this, that voters don't want to go back to the polls. None of the parties have a massive treasury to go back into another election right away. So there's other influences on them finding a way to make this work. And that's both their own personal interests and financial interests, and also the smackdown that the electorate could give them if they go back too soon.
Okay, quick. 10 seconds each here to finish up.
This election has not tested people's ability to get along well with each other. It's tested the opposite, is how much they hate each other, and that's going to be the big challenge for October 22nd.
Yeah, I agree. It's good. Trying to being the guy who can build the consensus between who's left.
All right, thank you all. It'll be an interesting night. Thanks for your perspective, and we'll talk, I'm sure, after the results are in. Take care.
Thank you.